It's not obvious how things have happened, but when Clarence went downstairs, he thought, right, I'll go and ring the police and obviously go and get help. As he went to pick their phone up, it had actually been disconnected.
Yeah, so
that's when you think there's something sinister, isn't there?
Yeah.
Just a quick disclaimer, the content presented in this podcast is based on real events and may contain graphic descriptions of violence, crime scenes and other disturbing material. Listener discretion is advised. This episode is sponsored by Think Forensic.
Think Forensic are a one-stop shop for all things forensic science and crime solving. They hold experience days, as well as corporate events, team building events, and general education for primary school right the way up to university level, as well as other events and consultancy. There's also a shop where you can get your hands on all things crime solving, from evidence gathering to packaging and collecting evidence, as well as other forensic science equipment.
For more information or to book on an experience day, please visit the website. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Grave Secrets. We're your hosts, I'm Annie.
And I'm Beth, and today we have a case study for you. This one was fascinating.
It was, you know, when you start like digging into something, you could just dig and dig and dig on this one. Like, you're down a rabbit hole, aren't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, probably one of the biggest rabbit holes I've gone down. I'd never heard of it before and I stumbled upon it. So it wasn't one of those where I was like, oh, I've always
wanted to do more on it,
So I just got no idea about it, which is funny really, because in actual fact, there are multiple films about this case, or based around the case. There is a book that was a bestseller. I'm pretty sure it was a New Times bestseller. And there's been loads of famous actors and actresses that have been involved in kind of telling part of this story.
Yeah, so it was quite surprising that when I was going through it, I thought I'd never even heard of this family.
So I was just about to say, I think that's what's important about it.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, all of that press and all of that exposure has been centred around other, let's call them characters in the scenario, that aren't the actual victims.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of films, TV stuff, books, even documentaries seem to centre around the offenders and how the offenders have got to where they are. Yeah. And it totally takes away from the family and the victims, doesn't it? It's very sensationalised in a lot of TV. And obviously we know it needs to be entertaining, and that's why they do it. But like always, we want to just bring it back and remind you about the victims in this case and focus on them.
So there's an awful lot of information out there. We got a bit bogged down in it, and as always, we didn't have enough time because we do try and film as regularly as possible. So it's, fitting it into the time that we've got. But I would say hopefully today's case you're going to find fascinating. It is really interesting. To me, it just proves how callous and cold-hearted some people can be. Yeah. Whether or not they knew the victims is kind of irregardless. Yeah. It was horrific, and there are multiple victims in this case. But if you do want to go on and read any more about it, watch obviously anything that's out there, there is a lot of information that you can get hold of.
Yeah, and one thing I liked about this is when I was researching, there was a lot of information out there, a lot of videos of interviews with families, the family and friends. Yeah. And I just think that gives a bit more of a background to the victims as well.
It gives you more of a holistic view, doesn't it? Yeah. Like there's quite a lot of footage of the house. There's quite a lot of photographs of the family. Yeah. Like you said, the interviews with friends gave you a real picture of like their lifestyle. Yeah. So there's a lot out there, but we'll get stuck into it now. So today we're going to be talking about the Clutter family murders. So this is a case that involves the death of multiple people. We are talking about a family that were murdered. We're going to talk about that family to begin with because it was quite a large family.
Yeah, and they seemed like they'd got a really good sort of family unit going on. I got the sense of they really liked the gatherings and getting together. They were a very sort of sociable family, weren't they?
Someone described them, and I thought this was a really nice summary, as a vibrant and prominent family.
Yeah.
They were prominent in the local community. They were present in the church. They were active members of like the cooperative that they had.
Yeah.
Because the father, who we'll talk about in a minute, was a farmer. So he employed a lot of people, but then also worked with other people within the local community. So yeah, they'd really established themselves in their community.
Yeah.
So we have Herb Clutter, who again made everyone feel safe. He was a big fan of family, so they'd got their own family, but then they used to invite wider family round quite often.
The parties sounded very good, didn't they? I thought, wow, when they'd arranged the parties, they were saying like, oh, this is what we're going to be doing. These are the activities we've got planned for you. Yeah. And everyone loved attending these sort of gatherings, didn't they?
Yeah, in fact, they'd got a big family reunion coming up, hadn't they?
They'd sent invitations out, actual formal invitations out.
What you needed to bring. I thought it was great. Yeah.
How many people they could sleep in the house, how much floor space there is.
I'll be like
You'd be a good host like that, yeah.
So Herb Clutter was the father. He was, as I say, really successful in his farming. The farm, it was called River Valley Farm. It was actually over 640 acres.
That is absolutely huge, because on the way here, I was listening to something. I was listening to a completely different podcast, and they were talking about an island that someone had bought.
Right.
And the island was like 300 acres.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh my God, what we're talking about is over 600 acres is absolutely huge.
I know, because when they first started talking about Herb having employees on the farm, I thought like you usually think of like a couple, maybe.
Yeah, a little farm,
but you can imagine he probably had like...
I'd say he had loads,
Yeah. We should probably say, don't know what's happening today, we've gone off-piste. In terms of location, we're in America. This is an American case. And it was based just outside of Kansas. But again, quite a small town. Well built up, I would have thought, but quite small and traditional.
Yeah, and this is also in the 50s as well. So we are sort of going back to a bit of an older case. I mean, we've done quite a few recently, haven't we, that have been sort of like the 2000s and really sort of up-to-date cases. So I thought it was quite nice to switch it up in this one as well.
Yeah, and I think because we are talking about the 1950s, that's what made it so lovely to have so much footage and all of these photographs and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think with the older cases, sometimes it is harder to resonate with them. But in this one, it wasn't at all, was it? It was really easy.
And what I noticed as well, because obviously it's the 50s, the investigation is totally different as well. So obviously I'll not jump ahead. I'll talk about that when we get to it.
Yeah. So Herb then married a woman called Bonnie, and Bonnie was a little more reserved, but still an absolutely great host. She would put together all these parties. Herb would invite everyone round. She also really enjoyed teaching, so teaching her own children, but then teaching again out there in the wider community. So Herb and Bonnie then had their children. They'd got quite a big family, so they'd got 3 daughters. They'd got Nancy, Beverly, and then Ivana, and then they'd also got a son called Kenyon. So really well established. It sounds like they were all close.
Yeah.
I think the children got on, and obviously they were a big part of the farm.
Yeah, so the 2 older children didn't actually live at home at this point.
Yeah, so
they'd already moved out.
Yeah, so they were still only, so Beverly was 21, and then Ivana, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was 23 at the time.
Still really young.
That's what I was, because they were both basically married and have their own lives. I mean, everyone has their own life, but they seemed pretty well established considering that they were still quite young. So in the house, there was the 4, Herb, Bonnie, Mum and Dad, and then Nancy and Kenyon, the 2 youngest. And they were of a similar age. They were 16 and 17.
Yeah.
So we're going to now cut to Sunday, November 15th, and this was in 1959.
Yeah, and because it's on a Sunday, we've already said that the family was really involved sort of in the church and the wider community. And every Sunday, they would go to church, wouldn't they?
Yep.
With other families as well. So they'd meet up with their families, they'd go to church together, the kids knew each other, the friends all went to church. So it was sort of like a sort of Sunday tradition, wasn't it?
And again, we're talking about an area of America where all of the houses obviously have quite a lot of land. So it would be a case of driving maybe 10 minutes down the lane to get to the neighbours to then pick them up to take them to church. So what we're going to reference now is a testimony from a man called Clarence Ewald. And Clarence was one of the close family friends of the Clutters, and this was his testimony from trial. Again, it was really powerful because you can listen to some of these testimonies and you get a real sense of how it all unfolded, I thought. So he said that just after 9 o'clock, they arrived at the Clutter household. Always, the kids would jump out of the car and go into the house to get, obviously, the other kids. So his daughter, Clarence's daughter, went and rang the bell. Usually, obviously, the whole family would come out ready to go to church. Nothing. Clarence then said that he could see the cars that were in the garage, so it didn't look like they were out. Or
they've not gone out anywhere. And he said if they would have gone anywhere, they probably would have rang anyway, because obviously you didn't have mobile phones back then, but they had the landlines that they could ring each other. And he said if there's ever a problem, they would always ring and let them know ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think at that stage, which we will reference probably throughout, a lot of the close friends of the family said that communities were just different at that point. Like you would just walk into someone's house. You knew all of your neighbours. It'd probably be one of those where you'd leave like a note on the front door if you popped out somewhere.
Leave it on the kitchen side, go in and say, oh, we've just called round, and pop a note on there.
So nothing sent awry, everything sent normal. But then they decided to go round to another neighbour's that was like closest to the Clutters, just to say, have you seen them this morning? Do you know where they are?
I think they initially thought that Nancy, because she was 16, they thought, she might have overslept or something.
Yes.
And I think her friend, who was also called Nancy, that had gone to ring the doorbell, she'd probably thought, I'll just go and wake her up quickly and get her ready for church, get her out of bed sort of thing.
And obviously they haven't got mobiles, so it's not like Clarence could have just rung up Herb and been like, where are you? So they went round to the neighbours, and obviously the neighbours then have a landline. So they decided to ring, still no answer. So the Ewalds decided to go back round to the house and found that the door was unlocked.
Which, again, that's a normal thing back then. They said that the sort of community and the place where they were was extremely safe.
Yeah.
So just to have your doors unlocked was a normal thing.
Yeah, you wouldn't think anything of it. So at that point, like you said, Clarence's daughter, Nancy, then ran upstairs to go to her friend Nancy's room.
Yeah.
They went into Nancy's room, and at that point they noticed that she appeared to be in her bed. Went to shake her, to wake her up, like you say, and at that stage she noticed that there was blood all over the wall. She obviously then screams, runs back downstairs, and Clarence then went up to see what had happened. He also saw the blood, came back out of the room, and then obviously had to find a way to ring 911.
It's really sort of because they know now that something's happened, but they don't know, it's not obvious how things have happened. But when Clarence went downstairs, he thought, right, I'll go and ring the police and obviously go and get help. As he went to pick their phone up, it had actually been disconnected.
Yeah, so
that's when you think there's something sinister, isn't there?
Yeah, so again, the last thing that you think when you're going to pick your friends up for church on a Sunday is that you're going to find anyone deceased.
Yeah.
Never mind blood spatter across a wall.
Yeah.
They would have had no idea probably how, like you say, that would have occurred. But then when they go downstairs, not only was the phone off the receiver, but then the wires had actually been cut. So it was an intentional slashing of the wires.
Yeah, preventing someone to ring for help, isn't it? Yeah.
And again, that then means that not even Clarence can then ring for
Yeah.
help. He also doesn't know where any other members of the family are at this point. He's obviously not seen them in the kitchen.
Yeah.
He's gone upstairs and he's not seen anyone other than Nancy.
And I was thinking, after seeing what you've seen with Nancy, would you go into the other rooms or would you wait for the police?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it?
Because your daughter's already seen this as well.
Yeah.
So you'd sort of want to console your daughter.
Yeah.
You'd want to get her out of the house. You'd
Yeah.
want to ring the police. You'd want to ring for help.
Yeah.
And you'd want to find the rest of the family. But
And
what do you do
check
first?
to see whether or not anyone's alive.
What do you do
it's
first in
really,
that situation?
Yeah, it's really hard. Again, obviously, it's a kind of local community, so local police as well. And the sheriff of Finney County, which was this local area, was called Earl Robinson, and he ended up being the first out on scene. He obviously knew of the family.
Because it's that small of a community, everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
And just, I thought for the sheriff, Earl Robinson, like, how bad would it have been for him to get called out? You know you're going to the Clutter family home. You know this family.
Yeah.
And then what are you going to find when you get there?
Yeah. And they really didn't know anything at this stage.
Yeah.
Because it could have been, you don't know, it could have been an accidental death.
Yeah.
From Nancy's. But again, then you've got the telephone wire.
But I'm guessing with something like this, obviously the sheriff gets called out and it's sort of a tight-knit community. I'm guessing not a lot of crime went on.
No.
So then how experienced is the sheriff in, dealing with any sort of high-level crime?
Yeah.
So that's when they had to call other people in.
And we also know how difficult it is to assess evidence in general. Like with blood spatter, some police officers that have never attended a bloody scene before can sometimes, we've probably talked about it in other episodes, have declared it as a suspicious death when actually it's been natural causes, just because they're unfamiliar with
with the scene.
blood. So you just don't know.
Yeah, and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation were brought in.
Yeah.
But is what I found intriguing about this one, the guy who was brought in to investigate it was called Al Dewey.
Yeah.
And he lived in the area.
Yeah.
So it was almost like he was already there.
Yeah. Again, because when you watch it on telly, they come from out of town, don't they? They put all the coats on and they're like, I don't want to be in the country.
They'd bring them from like the main city. So I'm guessing like if it was in the UK, they'd bring them from London back then, and it'd be this big team of investigators. But this guy was already there.
Yeah, and Al was part of the same church, wasn't he? So Al Dewey was the lead investigator at this stage, and then obviously Earl Robinson is the sheriff.
But again, Al Dewey knows the family.
Yeah,
like both of these people know the family
and really well respected. So they ultimately then searched the house, searched the Clutter family home, and they went back upstairs and saw that Nancy was in fact deceased. But then obviously they needed to work out what had actually happened. They did state that when they first looked round the property, it didn't appear that there were any signs of struggle. So they'd called for assistance, but it didn't look like there were any signs of struggle.
Right.
But then obviously they had to find the other family members.
Yeah.
So Mr. Clutter so that's Herb, was ultimately found bound and gagged in I couldn't work out what room it was, but I called it the pantry.
So it said the furnace room. So I was reading a lot and it kept saying furnace room, and I thought, is this something that they just have in America, or is it back then where they had like an open coal fire?
And then you'd put all the coal in there.
And then it'd heat the rest of the, I don't actually know
a bit
100%.
similar. It looked, didn't it? Because you can see photos of the scenes. And it looked like a bit of a mix between probably like a cellar room and a pantry type thing. Obviously, but it's a furnace room. So he was found on the floor there, and he had been shot in the head with a 12-gauge shotgun. Unfortunately, again, this was a sizable property, and when they then moved down into another area, which was a really large area of like the basement, Kenyon, the son, was then found again tied, in this case, to the sofa, but had been bound, gagged, and also shot in the head. So that's two victims, 3 victims with Nancy. And so now you are unfortunately expecting that Bonnie, the mother, is also going to be found deceased. I did find it heartbreaking as well that they were all in separate rooms.
Yeah, they've been separated and bound and gagged and then all killed in the same way. And you just know that obviously they've died on their own.
Yeah.
Which is
it
sad.
reminded me of the
Pottery Cottage
murders. Yeah.
It did me actually, because that was similar. It was a case we covered quite early on, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
That's quite a similar one in the UK.
Yeah, but again, it was that segregation of all the family members, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So ultimately, they did then go upstairs, and Bonnie, the mother, was found in the same way, but this time in her bedroom. It didn't appear that she was asleep at the time, but she was then found in her bedroom. Obviously, Nancy was only 16. She was found in the same state, but interestingly, they noted that she'd actually been shot in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Whereas the others had either been shot kind of looking at the victim.
Yeah, or in the
side of
side.
the head.
Yeah, I think with that, you can read into it quite a lot, can't you? So I think when you're starting the investigation, you've got nothing at this moment apart from your 4 victims.
Yeah.
And you're probably thinking, well, you know, we need to get some sort of suspects on the list here.
Yeah.
And if you look at the way that it's been done, they seem to think that it could have been done by someone who knew Nancy because they couldn't sort of stand to look her in the face as they were killing her. But like, that's just a theory at this point.
And because they'd obviously been tied up and it was really like heinous, they believed that it might be someone that had like a vendetta against the family. Like there was a reason for them to be so awful about it, rather than it just be like a shotgun attack almost.
And how awful is this for Ivana and Beverly, because they're the 2 surviving children who were obviously not in the house at the time, but to find out that your entire family have been killed
in your home as well. Like I know there's no good way, but just to think how many good family memories there would have been in that home. Yeah. And then to think that you could never go back there because of what's happened.
And not only that, your home is where you're meant to feel safe.
And
like your safety net.
I would like to think maybe you'd go back there for comfort. It's like people that lose someone in their family, but they keep the room how it was, and that's for comfort, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's tough, and I think for a lot of people, it's because they can't face it. But also, it's comfort having all of their things there. I just don't think it'd be the same in this case at all.
No, not at all.
So they had 4 main investigators on the case that were all extremely experienced. And I did get the feeling that people were happy with the team that were assigned to the case.
It was almost like the best investigators were assigned, because I'm guessing nothing like this would probably even have come across like for the Bureau of Investigation. No. So this is, it's sort of one where I'm guessing they would pick out the 4 best. Yeah. It weren't even detectives, was it? It was sort of like investigators.
Yeah, so you've got Al Dewey, Harold Nye, Roy Church, and then Clarence Dunce. And they, again, searched really thoroughly. They were looking for latent fingerprints. They also found a partial footwear mark, and that was in blood. They believed that was in Herb Clutter's blood due to like the location of where it was in the basement, which they photographed, again, really high level photographs.
I was thinking about this, like the photographs were actually quite clear. So they went in and photographed the scene, which is basically what we would do nowadays. So it's still like sort of similar procedure. I know obviously they didn't have any PPE on. They all had the same hats on, the long like detective coats, didn't they? But I wonder how they would develop the latent fingerprints in this case in the 50s. I wonder what they used, or if it was something similar to the aluminium powder.
Probably. I'm not. Probably more granular, I would have.
So on the photo of the footwear mark, that was then, they said, sent to the lab. And I was like, wow, like we've got like labs and everything here. And they said it was a cat paw half sole. So when I looked these up, because I'd not heard of cat paw before,
Yeah.
I thought, what's this? And it sort of have like circles on the sole that were rubber, and it's to stop you slipping. So instead of having like a full rubber sole and grips on it, it just had these circles, didn't it?
Right.
On it. Did you see it? It was a bit of a
I thought it
distinctive.
Yeah, it was distinctive, yeah. So obviously that's a great piece of evidence. And then as they search the property, they notice that, again, there was no clear motive as such. Obviously there was intent because of the slashed cords. Everyone had been bound, so you'd assume that someone would have had to have brought the kind of the ties or the rope and that kind of thing. But you are on a farm, so I don't know. That's something to consider.
So you're sort of looking if it's premeditated and what is the motive. So has anything gone missing?
Well,
but are you going to know because the family are not there to tell you what's gone?
Yeah. And in this case, the only things that they'd noticed that were taken, again, that's a good point.
I was going to say how. I thought this when I was researching. I thought, how do they know? Were they in photographs or did other family members say? But I mean, like, if I went to my sister's house and something had happened, I wouldn't be able to say what had been taken, and I go there all the time.
That decorative vase is missing. But there was a portable radio that was missing, and then a pair of binoculars. Again, it didn't make sense that this was kind of a vendetta type of crime because of how well liked and respected the whole family were in the community. But again, because of how they'd found the victims, it didn't add up, and they weren't sure what the motive was. But it was brutal, and they know that they need to catch whoever this offender is.
And I think when something like this happens within a small, tight-knit community, the entire community starts sort of going into panic.
Yeah.
And I read an interview with someone saying that they worked in like I don't know if it was like a hardware store, and all of the locks just sold out that afternoon. People started locking the garages, locking the doors, and it's something that they'd never done before, but everyone was fearful for their life, because if it could happen to the Clutter family, everyone thought, well, it could happen to basically anyone.
So 4 days after the murders, this sense of community is then absolutely shown in abundance, because the church for the funerals, it was a joint funeral, was packed out. The 4 caskets laid next to each other was really kind of difficult to see.
Yeah.
But there were over 1,000 people in the church. And there were a few different people that referenced how bright and sunny it was on the day, and that there were these huge stained glass windows, and the light was just pouring in. And it was almost as if like the family were like thanking people for kind of showing up for them. And it did feel like, obviously it was a really difficult event, but that their community was really kind of supporting each other and behind each other. Yeah. And then obviously supporting the 2 daughters that had come back. They were there with their loved ones, so with their partners, and kind of holding it together effectively. Nancy also had a boyfriend, and he was one of the pallbearers of the coffin, which I thought was really like...
And he was only young as well, wasn't he? Was he 16 or 17 at the time? Because I know Nancy was 16. So for him to sort of do that so young.
Yeah. You've then obviously got plainclothed police officers there, because they've got to see, again, sometimes the offender will attend something like the family funeral. But they are now deep into their investigation. And through looking at things like the receipts and finances, they discovered that 1 day prior to the murders, Herb Clutter had actually taken out a £40,000 life insurance policy.
That would be a lot back then as well.
Yeah. Which then did mean that the 2 surviving daughters would receive over that amount each, basically, in the case of obviously their parents' death.
So at first, when you hear about this, you think, oh, that's a bit suspicious.
Yeah.
That's weird, like what the day before.
Yeah.
But when the investigators actually looked into it, it showed that this had been sort of in the pipeline for a long time. I don't think it's just like now where you could go into somewhere or we could do it online, we could ring up and your insurance policy is taken out there and then.
No.
This will have been something that will have been done months in the lead up, and it was just by coincidence that it was the day before that everything was sort of
through, like.
it was just finalised, wasn't it? So it wasn't actually taken out then, it was taken out months ago, when it was just finalised.
There's no evidence to suggest that the two daughters even knew about that.
Yeah, so they didn't know that they were going to benefit financially in any way.
So that was ruled out. Obviously, I've just then mentioned that Nancy also had a boyfriend. He was believed to have been the last person to see the family alive. He'd been there the day prior, round at the Clutter family home, which he would do quite often. But again, neither Al Dewey or the other lead detectives believed that he could have had anything to do with it. So he was called Bob. The boyfriend was called Bob.
There was an interview with Bob as well, and he was saying about him being, he was questioned back then, and that they just knew that obviously he wasn't involved in it. But again, at 17, you've just lost your girlfriend, and now you're being questioned over a murder.
Yeah, because
it must have been quite.
Said it made sense that they came to talk to me about it.
Yeah, he said I knew they were coming, didn't I? Yeah,
it seemed like he got his kind of head switched on.
Even
of thing
back
at
then.
That age. The one thing that I found really, I guess beautiful in a way, was that this documentary and some of the interviews that we found are obviously years post this event, but everyone is still so very emotional when they talk about it.
Yeah.
Obviously it was traumatic for the community in general, but you can tell how much each family member was loved by the way that they are still talked about today. Everyone still gets very emotional when they talk about them. So as I mentioned, obviously the funeral was absolutely packed, but the investigation has to continue. They ultimately decided, both Al and the sheriff, to work with the local media in this case, and they actually put a reward out there via the Hutchinson News, so not directly through the police, but through Hutchinson News.
So normally it's the family, isn't it, that put a reward out, but in this case it was the actual newspaper that put up the reward money, which I thought again is a lot different to now, isn't it? You wouldn't hear of that happening now at all.
And that was for £1,000, which, like we say, big money at the time. Over 250 leads come through. Now, we often talk about cases that are like present day, how big a job that is in terms of, task force and manpower. That would have been even more difficult to do back in the 50s because you haven't got any of the home system or any of the technology that we've got now. Ultimately, a lot of it, unfortunately, small town, was rumour and gossip, but they obviously checked each one thoroughly over the course of 6 days, so it took a week for them to process through all of those
I
things.
didn't actually think that was that bad, though, to say that they didn't have a lot of manpower behind this.
Yeah.
6 days, it's under a week.
Yeah. And I guess there would be some of them that would be more gossipy that you could probably you'd have to verify, but you could rule it out pretty quickly.
Yeah,
I suppose. We've mentioned the photographs that were taken at the scene. Obviously, these now need analysing in further detail, and it was actually Rich Rolder, I want to say, who was the assistant police chief that had taken all of the photographs. They were looking at this footwear mark in blood because obviously it got the significant pattern, and he actually noticed that kind of in the reflection where the sun had shone, it had picked up the dust, and there was actually a secondary footwear mark which was a dust impression.
So this was literally by chance.
Yeah.
He didn't intend to take a photo of the second footwear mark.
No.
It just showed up on the first one.
Yeah.
And if that lighting wasn't right at that exact time he took the photo, that wouldn't have shown up, because we both know the lighting is a massive thing in these, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we are working with Think Forensic, we do quite a lot on footwear marks, and it's one of those
Your oblique lighting.
and no one thinks that it's that exciting, whereas I'm like, ooh. So when they mentioned these two footwear marks, I thought, oh, now we'd use an Esler, what would they have used then? But they didn't have either of that because they just got the photograph of it. So obviously they are then trying to work out whether or not that's a separate footwear mark. And the likelihood is that it would be, because if you've had someone step in blood, they are then going to
leave a blood marks again, aren't they?
Yeah, bloody footwear marks. Whereas if you've got one just in dust, then unless it's herbs, but it didn't match herbs, then that would mean that you've potentially got two suspects.
Yeah.
So that changes the game again completely.
Yeah, because at the moment, there's nothing really, there's no evidence that's leading to anyone in this situation. So you just think at first, don't you, we're just looking for one person, but then now you know you're looking for two people.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even more scary, because you know you've got two people working together, and the further down the line this investigation gets, one of the investigators, I think it was Al, was saying they've now had this time to put a distance between us and the investigation.
Yeah.
So within 6 days, even though it's not like nowadays where you could jump on a plane and you could be other side of the world, you could still have got pretty far in those 6 hours, and you could be in a totally different state. And because they haven't got the home system linking the different states together, once that person is gone, they're gone, aren't they?
Yeah. And I also think when it's two people, then it's like, well, then is it premeditated? It's more likely to be premeditated.
Yeah, I think so.
If two people have just happened to be around at the house and then you know,
you've got to have discussed it, haven't you?
Yeah. So it changes everything then, doesn't it? But at this stage, a lead then comes through. A bit of a wild card, and I think it was probably one of those where they had this lead come through and they probably were weighing up how seriously to take it at first.
Do you think they just thought, oh, here we go, but we better go and check it out?
Yeah, so ultimately what had happened was an inmate at Kansas State Penitentiary heard about the reward. So already you're thinking, oh, well, hang on a minute, because are they just wanting to do it for the reward?
And if they're already in prison, are they a reliable source?
Yes. So an inmate comes forward and says that they have information regarding the Clutter case. They do interview him. So they interview him on December the 5th. And it's a man called Floyd Wells. So he was 32 and he'd previously worked at the Clutter family home when it was being built, because again, they built it up themselves during, what was it,
48 and 49.
So we knew of the family, and he had basically admitted that while he was talking to another inmate, he had actually referenced being kind of amazed because he'd seen Herb Clutter pay a large bill for lumber, for like timber, and it was over £1,000, so he knew that this family had money. Now, if they're building their own house, like, surely you would know that already. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you would think so, but I feel like seeing
hand it over so easily, maybe.
Yeah, and seeing the
like,
cash there in person might have been. But when he was talking to his sort of cellmate about this, you think, was he saying it in a way where he was bragging, saying, I know someone with this amount of money, or I've seen this amount of money? Because obviously after Floyd had seen Mr. Clutter hand over that amount of money, he'd not done anything. No. He'd not robbed him. He'd not tried to do anything.
Yeah.
Do you know, he'd just seen it and that was it.
And in actual fact, Floyd was then imprisoned at a later date for larceny and the word I can't say.
Burglary.
Yeah. But unrelated to the Clutters. So that was his charges. So you would have, so he knew he'd got to have committed a crime there, but he didn't. He then became cellmates with a man called Richard Eugene Hickok, who was 28.
They're all so young in this. That's one thing I noticed. Like,
do you feel like
all
life
20s
went really quickly? Like back in the day. Do you know what I mean? They went through school and everything a lot quicker, didn't they? Like, you were done by 16, basically.
Because even looking at photos of these people,
they looked older.
I thought they looked older. They looked like maybe mid-30s, and I thought, oh God, they're only in like the mid to late 20s.
So they're then chatting, like you say, chatting in their cell together, and Hickok was actually about to get released from prison. So when he was saying, basically, I'm going to do one big job, get a load of money, and then I can either do a runner or do whatever I want, Floyd Wells had then turned round and said, well, look, I've already told you, the Clutter family are loaded, you can probably get a job working on their farm, get some money, and then go your own way, do what you want.
Yeah, sort of legitimately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Hickok then is armed with all of this information, and he thinks, I know what I could do here. Rather than earn my money legitimately through the Clutters, I've heard that they've got over £1,000 in cash. They've probably got a safe on the property. I'm going to tell my mate. And he had been communicating with another person in the prison called Perry Edward Smith. And Perry had, I would say, I've got delusions of grandeur to some extent. He was also pretty young, but he liked talking about how big and impressive he was, how many different crimes he'd committed.
It was all pretty much like bravado, though, isn't it, in prison? You don't know if someone has actually done what they've said they've done, or if they're just lying just to make people either scared of them or to impress people.
Mm-hmm. But he did state that he had actually killed someone. So I think at this stage, Hickok's probably thinking, right, perfect, I've got my accomplice.
Got my wingman,
yeah. So he then goes and talks to Smith about it and says, look, when we both get released, we'll pull enough jobs, is what they call them when you're committing crimes. We're gonna pull some jobs to get enough money to then buy a boat for deep sea fishing. Where that came from, I
thought that. I was like, that's very random.
Yeah. Buy a boat for deep sea fishing, make loads of money, and then go sail off into the sunset. I guess,
yeah, maybe they thought that's what was going to make them the most money out of all the jobs.
Yeah,
if they could do that.
That is a good money earner, but I guess you need to be very good at it. So that was the plan, and Smith was paroled on July 6th, and Hickok was also paroled shortly after. So they both had told Floyd Wells, see you later, we're off to the Clutter home, we're going to see if they've still got money in the safe and do a big job, basically. Wells had then said, well, what are you going to do if it goes wrong or if they see you? He said, well, we'll likely have to tie him up and kill him, rob him and kill him. Wells didn't think anything of it because, like you say, there's a lot of bravado in prison, and then they're released, and that was that. Wells then hears about the Clutter family murders on the news over the radio through the prison, and then thinks, oh God.
Yeah, they actually did it.
They actually went through with it, and they've actually killed the whole family.
And you'd feel I would feel some form of responsibility, because even if you were just bragging about knowing someone with a lot of money, like if they got robbed, I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't bad if they got robbed, but like for the whole family to get murdered,
I know,
is horrendous. And you'd think, well, if I wouldn't have given that information, the whole family would still be alive.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that Floyd Wells was had been on good terms with the family. They paid him. He'd worked for them. You know, like
he didn't commit any crimes as far as we know against the family. Yeah.
So it's someone that you know, isn't it?
Yeah, horrendous. So they've now got 2 suspect names. They've identified that they think there's 2 suspects. That's effectively been confirmed. They then needed enough evidence to verify that Wells was telling the truth. And ultimately they went through the kind of rosters of employee names that Herb Clutter had, and they did find Floyd Wells was on the roster, so he wasn't lying about having worked there. He probably likely wasn't lying about any of it.
Yeah.
But now they've got to track down these 2 suspects.
Which is harder than you think, isn't it? You can, you know, if you know what car they were driving, you could put out the license plate. Yeah. But at this point, the investigators don't really know a great deal, do they? No. They know the names, but they have no idea where they could be.
Where they are. You can't get cell phone data at this stage. You're not pinging them off towers.
Yeah. And you've not got AMPR
cameras for PNC checks. Yeah, none of that. So it's really difficult to locate people. Now, I'd just like to say, at this stage, there was a hell of a lot of investigating that went on. We are not going to talk through it all today because we'd be on this episode for 2 hours, or we'd have to do a part 2.
I think about 3 hours.
Yeah. I also think that this next phase is a really kind of good and interesting part of the story, but it's not what we're focused on today.
Yeah.
Effectively, what happens is these 2 people, then are on the run.
Yeah.
And they are evading police. Now, the way in which they did that is fascinating, but that's not what we're concentrating on today.
No, there's lots of information out there where you can actually see interviews with the offenders. You can watch the films, you can read the book.
It shows you like the different paths that they tracked over America into Mexico.
Yeah, and back.
And back. Yeah, it is interesting, but again, that's not our priority today. We're talking about the Clutter family. So the police are still trying to track them down, and they launched a manhunt. So they found that sometime in November, Hickok had actually cashed a bad check. So they decided, quite tactically I thought, to place a warrant for his arrest for the bad checks. That then meant that they could kind of get him to come up in different forces in different states.
And get him into, once they get him, they can get him into custody as well. So even though it's not, you can't charge him with a murder straight away, he's in custody. And it's not like now where you could just hold them for 24 hours and they have to go.
No.
Like, if once you've got them in there, you could probably get quite a bit of information out of them.
Yeah, so they've still really got no idea where he is, but they are trying to kind of close the net on him a little bit. And because of that warrant, they were able to search his family farm, because his family also lived on a farm. Again, really well respected, really well liked, but Richard Hickok, who was named kind of Dick, that was his nickname, was known to be a petty criminal.
Yeah.
So his family were really well liked, but it was one of those where it sounds like everyone felt quite sorry for the family because
you've got a bit of you've got a tearaway son, and the family were like earning an honest living. They were running a farm. They were doing everything the right way. And it was just their son was just known as this sort of thief and criminal.
What I also thought was a real sign of the times is that Hickok's father, was known for, if he heard that his son had been stealing things from another local farm or another local property, his dad basically used to take horses round to the house and be like, I'm really sorry about him.
I'm sorry for my son's behaviour.
I can't get you what you had back, but here's a horse.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, can you imagine if
that was funny because one of the people said you could always tell how much trouble the son was in by how many horses were on the farm. Because if there was not many horses, it meant he'd have to give a lot of horses away to cover, not cover up what he's, to compensate, wasn't it?
Yeah. So ultimately they searched the family farm and they did find key evidence. They found a bloody shirt, and that was found in a wardrobe, and then in a drawer there was also a shotgun. Now the shotgun, obviously there's a lot of shotguns in America at that time.
And on a farm as well. Even in the UK, there's a lot of shotguns on a farm. Every farmer would probably have one or more firearms, especially shotgun in the house.
But it did look like a similar gauge weapon to that had been used in the Clutter's murders. So they did then obviously take that. So we're now skipping all the way to Christmas Day, and the police have still not tracked down the pair of criminals. We still don't know that they're guilty. We don't know that they've categorically done it.
Yeah.
But they're certainly the main suspects at this stage.
The only suspects as well.
Yeah. So by 46 days after the murders, so we're now on the 30th of December, finally a significant breakthrough, and that's when a phone call came through to Al Dewey while he was at his home, and it was actually from law enforcement over in Las Vegas. And they had noticed the bolo, so they'd be on the lookout. So 2 local officers were on their ordinary kind of patrol, and they noticed a vehicle that matched a description that someone else had given that matched plates to a vehicle that they'd been seen in.
I bet Al was so quick to jump in his car and be on his way to Vegas. I don't know how far it is.
Apparently, so his son is actually interviewed because he was quite young at the time, but he said he remembered his dad getting out a map and basically tracking what route he was going to take to Vegas.
To get
the quickest to Vegas.
Do you know how far away it is?
No, I've no
Because obviously,
idea.
I'm guessing it's quite a drive.
Because they basically said, like, hold him for as long as you can and we'll get there as quickly as we can, kind of thing. But what had happened is that Wells and Hickok had basically shipped some of their possessions to this post office in Vegas and then made their way there on this route. So they were at the post office picking up basically some of their stuff. So the officers searched the car and found a box that had a postmark from Mexico on it, which is where they'd also been. And at that point, the pair are finally arrested. I say finally, but really, within 46 days, I don't think that's bad at all.
It's not, because even nowadays, it takes a while, doesn't it? You know, I know now we've got more procedures that you have to go through to get someone into custody.
Yeah.
But to be found in a different... is it a different state?
Yeah.
So to be found in a different state as well and not have that crossover with the systems, I think it is quite good going.
I think it was quite quick. Obviously, it wouldn't feel like that for certain people, you know, for like the family and the community and things. But overall, I thought it was quite impressive. So they are then held. They say, right, keep them in maximum security, hold them there until we can get there.
Keep them separate as well.
Keep them separate, yeah. And actually, in this box that had the Mexico stamp on it, they opened it, and in there were 2 pairs of shoes. And those 2 pairs of shoes appeared to match the tread patterns of those found at the crime scene. So now we've not just got evidence which would suggest it's likely going to be the most conclusive evidence we've got so far.
Yeah, and you could probably, obviously you can't do the whole DNA testing on the blood, but on the bottom of these shoes, surely there will have been some traces of blood.
Yeah.
One, they would have been able to check if it was human blood, probably with some sort of presumptive test.
Yeah.
And maybe even then they might have been able to get a blood group from it as well, you know, just a generalised... so I know it's not obviously the same as DNA nowadays, but it's an indicator.
Yeah, definitely. And we've talked about it before in terms of, yes, you leave footwear marks everywhere you go, but if it's in blood, you had to have been there after the blood has been lost in order to stand in it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I can stand anywhere, but if something takes place in this room...
Yeah.
If I'm 3 hours away, how else would how
has it got that in blood?
Mark in blood?
Yeah.
So when the pair were then questioned, they said, well, how on earth do you think your footwear mark might have been found at the scene in blood or next to the blood? And it was really funny how very quickly, and we've talked about this in other cases, the pair went against each other.
Yeah. It's your instinct though, isn't it? To blame the other person, because now you've got caught, you know, they would have probably been talking about this the whole time to Mexico, to Vegas.
Yeah.
We're not going to say anything. Are you going to say anything? I'm not going to say anything. Promise me you're not going to say anything.
Yeah.
And then as soon as they're actually caught, it's a different scenario, isn't it? Because it's you for yourself at this point now.
Yeah, definitely. So Hickok then asks whether or not he's able to get off on a murder charge. Because he basically claims that he didn't pull the trigger, he had no idea what was going to happen, but by doing this, basically gave a full confession. Because
you were there. It shows you were there.
You're saying, well, yes, I was there. Yes, I had absolutely everything to do with it, but I didn't know that anyone was going to die. But yes, you know, so basically gives this full confession. So quickly, Hickok is kind of giving the game away. Meanwhile, Smith is very cagey, would avoid answering questions, denied any knowledge of having anything to do with the murders or even having heard of the Clutter family or knowing the family.
I think that Smith had probably got more experience within the police, like as in dealing with the police, and he knew a little bit more about what to say, what not to say, sort of thing.
He also did state that they had agreed beforehand while they were on the run that should anything happen and should they be arrested, they both just keep quiet.
Yeah.
Hickok clearly didn't do that. No. But, you know, Smith had obviously said that was the best course of action to take.
Yeah.
So 30th of December was when they were finally arrested and located. And by the 4th of January, they'd been taken back to Kansas. And they were both then charged with 4 counts of murder.
Yeah.
Again, still kept separately at this point so that they couldn't discuss. But this was really clever, I thought. So they're then in separate cars getting taken from the police station back to like the cells in the prison. And at this point, kind of, Smith's still not really said anything.
Yeah, but they've both got investigators in the car with them, haven't they? So they've both got people in each car.
Yeah. So, and they're keeping the cars quite close to each other, right? So they're heading in the same direction. They're in separate cars, but they can kind of see each other in these vehicles. And so it was at that point that one of the officers then turned and said to Smith, "You do know he's talking to us. He's telling us what's going on here. He's
basically putting it on you.
And he's putting it on you." At that point, obviously, Smith hadn't said anything, and he then sees through the car window Hickok chatting away.
It might not even be chatting about that though. It could have been anything. Yeah.
And he's like, "Right, I'll tell you what happened." If he's basically giving you his version of events, I'll tell you what actually happened. And they then gave his account, basically. So Smith says that he only went to Kansas because of Hickok, basically said that it would be a cinch, it would be an easy setup, and that he'd got the plan in place. So Smith went and stayed at Hickok's parents' farm, where they ultimately found the shotgun. And then they changed the tyres of Hickok's car, prepared, so it was premeditated. They went and bought shotgun shells. They brought out the shotgun. They bought a load of cord and like twine, and then, armed with like hunting jackets, then drove to the Clutter residence.
Yeah, so they arrived at the Clutter residence at about 1 a.m. And like we said, the door was already unlocked. That wasn't unusual. You trusted the people in your neighbourhood not to obviously come into your home.
Yeah.
So they went in there and tried to find the safe. So at this point at 1 a.m, you're probably expecting everyone to be asleep.
Yeah.
They thought, right, let's have a look for this safe. Let's get the money. That's sort of what they were focused on doing, isn't it?
And it did sound like they still weren't completely sure what they were going to do. Like, one had basically said, well, what do we do if they see us? The other one had said, oh, well, we're going to have to do something.
Yeah.
One of them said he was really nervous and he didn't want to go through with it. And so it didn't seem like they had really thought it through properly.
We say it's premeditated, but it's not planned out to a T, is it?
No.
Like, if you were going to pull something off, but they didn't even know if they'd got a safe in the house at this point.
They've also committed no prior offences together.
Yeah.
So, you know, generally speaking, I would imagine, like, if me and you were to break into somewhere, I might be on distraction techniques and you'd be the
but you'd
logical
plan it.
person.
yeah. We'd plan it.
Yeah, you'd plan it. Like, I've worked out who's doing what now. But it didn't even seem like they knew who would kind of be the brawl and who would be the one that they'd just not thought it through.
So when they were looking for the safe around the house, they actually came across Mr. Clutter. Mm-hmm. So I think they were probably thinking that he was asleep, maybe in bed, that they could get in and out. So they asked him for the money, but Mr. Clutter actually said there is no money.
Yeah,
there's nothing.
He said, look, I would give it you if I had any, if we did have any, but there isn't any. And at this point, Smith basically said that Hickok just kind of couldn't comprehend that. He wouldn't just take their word for it. He was a bit like, okay, let's just leave. But he wasn't having any of it. And it was as if Hickok had, again, got this fantasy of this big job that they were going to pull off, this almost like heist. And
they'd have the money for everything and they'd have a good life.
Yeah, and it just wasn't going to plan, but he couldn't
compute it, could I?
No.
In his head.
So at that stage, they then went back upstairs, and obviously the family are now going to be hearing that something is going on. And it was at that point that Bonnie then gets involved, and Bonnie's saying, look, whatever my husband said, he's right.
Yeah, we haven't got anything.
We haven't got any money. But they weren't accepting it, were they?
No. And I didn't really understand, like, they went round and they woke the family members up sort of one by one, but the kids could have probably slept through what was happening at that time.
And then they also said that because they were all there, they then didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
So they were then trying to work out what to do. So Smith was then kind of assigned to tie everyone up. So he then decided to keep everyone segregated. So he then tied up Nancy in her room, Bonnie, the mother, in her room, and then they both took the men, I say men, Kenyon was only 15 actually, I think, and then Herb downstairs.
Yeah.
But again, it was unclear as to what they were doing.
What they were going to do at that point, because they've got the family all tied up and separated.
They'd looked in Bonnie's handbag.
Yeah.
She'd got, I think it was $50.
Yeah, I think it was $50 that they got all together from everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's nothing, is it?
And so you would think they'd just flee at that stage. However, they were like, but we talked about this, they've seen us.
We could be identified.
So it was that point that they decided that they would have to kill them. They decided to start with Herb Clutter. And again, there's kind of really graphic accounts of what actually happened at this stage, and we're not going to go into loads of detail, but ultimately they were both trying to get the other one to do it because neither of them wanted to kill anyone.
No, and I don't think either of them had killed anyone before. So even though Smith had said it, I don't think he had.
No.
So, then you're put in a situation where it's like, oh God, I've almost got to do it now. I've said that I've done it.
Yeah.
And with the injuries to Mr. Clutter as well. So right at the beginning, when I was looking at how they were found and what injuries, I thought that's strange that there was a shot. He was shot in the head with a shotgun.
Yeah.
But he'd also got his throat cut as well.
Yeah.
And I thought, why would you do the two? Like, because one of those would have killed you.
Yeah. But this is why. So it makes sense then when they gave their account. So basically, Smith said he was getting more and more frustrated with Hickok. Hickok was kind of umming and ahhing and not making any decision. So Smith then pulls out a knife, and at that stage, he said it was almost as if he was taking his frustration out on Hickok rather than Hickok himself. But he then slits the throat of Herb Clutter. He then hands the knife over to Hickok and is basically like, you've got to do something now. Yeah. It's not all on me. And Hickok then goes to stab Herb again, but unfortunately not anywhere that would have created kind of any further injuries or, in fact, killed him. And they said that you could tell that Herb was struggling at that stage, so they did want to just kill him. So at that point, Smith then decided to use the shotgun and kill him. So that is why then he was shot in the head. At that point, he then didn't know what to do, so then went out and then shot Kenyon, then before going upstairs and shooting Nancy and Mrs. Clutter.
That's actually crazy that the four members of this family got killed for $50, basically.
I know. Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? So again, according to police reports, it's then believed that the pair drove towards a place called Scott City, pulled up on a gravel road, dug a hole, and that's where they put the shotgun shells, then leftover cord and tape, as well as the gloves that they'd used, buried it all, and then again started this basically route of them being on the run. Yeah. Ultimately, again, fantasizing about going off to Mexico and never being found. So they were still very, just out of touch with reality, really, I think, at that stage. But then I guess you've got to cling on to the fantasy at that point.
Yeah, you've already done it. But then if it's not planned, would you not be in shock or feel some sort of remorse?
And quite frankly, they just didn't like each other. So how it was all going to play out, I've just got no idea. They did ultimately find out that the portable radio and the binoculars, the pair had pawned and they'd sold again on this route, which is, again, there were loads of little clues and loads of pieces of evidence that allowed them to ultimately track where they'd been.
They'd done quite a lot of dodgy checks, didn't they?
Yeah. And they gave accounts of what they'd done and where they'd been on the run. But again, that was all quite self-serving. So we've not really talked about the two offenders too much today. There is quite a lot of information out there about them. They had both suffered injuries at some point in their lives. They'd both got into separate accidents. One of them was a motorcycle accident. One of them was a car wreck. And there was quite a lot of...
It was questions surrounding it, wasn't it?
Surrounding whether or not it was maybe brain injuries that had affected their changes in behaviour and their criminal activity.
But back then, nothing was ever really proved. Now there might be more of a chance with, obviously, the advances in everything. But there wasn't really anything to say it had or it hadn't, other than the words of like friends and family saying, you know, they had changed around that time or anything like that.
But they were both very intelligent. Like, again, and this wouldn't happen now so much, especially not in the UK, but there's quite a lot of like autobiographies from the two of them. There was a huge piece that Hitchcock had done in a magazine called Mail magazine. So it was all quite self-serving, but again, they give a lot of information about this crime that they'd committed.
And themselves, really, isn't there?
And themselves, the backstory. So there is quite a lot of backstory if you want to go into it. But ultimately, they had, it went to trial, and by the 29th of March 1960, that's when the closing argument was heard. And a man called Logan Green gave the closing argument for prosecution, and he said that they were cold and calculated murders, ultimately all just for $80.
Yeah.
So it was only $80.
Only 80 that they got, wow.
It took half an hour for the jury to declare them both guilty, and they were both sentenced to death via hanging. On April the 14th, 1965, they were in fact then both hanged at the Kansas State Prison near Lansing, which is just north of Kansas City.
So they didn't really go like you do now on death row. You're just sentenced to it and then you're executed, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like it's
so
pretty
what was
quick.
that? Within 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Compared to being like, there's people who've been on death row for years and years and years, isn't there?
Yeah, and again, there's information about what they had for the last meal and what the last words were, who was actually there to witness the hanging. But we're not going to go into that because what we're remembering are the victims, and that was the Clutter family. So Herbert W. Clutter was aged 48 at the time he was murdered. Bonnie Mae Clutter was just 45 when she was murdered. Kenyon Neil Clutter, who had been described as a cheeky chap who loved the farm, was just 15. He was the youngest of the family to be killed. And Nancy Mae Clutter was known as a beautiful young woman who knew her own mind, and she was just 16 at the time. There were also quite a lot of letters between Nancy and
her cousin, wasn't it? Yeah.
And again, even if you just listen to some of those extracts, I thought they were really...
They give a really good insight
lovely,
into how like Nancy was as a person. There's quite a lot of personality just in the letters, isn't there? Yeah.
So there you go. Hopefully we've managed to summarise that one. Again, it was quite tricky to summarise because there is so much information in there. But hopefully you've kind of followed it through with us, understood it, and as I say, it's remembering the victims on this one. So if you are interested in finding anything else about, if you just put in the Clutter family murders
on Google, loads come up.
Yeah, you'll find all sorts. I would say that all of the films that we've referenced at the beginning, we haven't touched upon it at all in this case, but actually what happened was that a glitterati type journalist from New York heard about it and was interested in covering the case, but not because he wanted to get to the bottom of it. He actually said he didn't care whether they ever found out who did it, just because he was interested in the response from a small town.
Yeah.
So he went out to the small town, and all of the books and all of the films are actually about this journalist.
Rather than focusing on the family or even the offenders.
Yeah.
A lot of it is based around him, which I did find quite odd because a lot of these things, if they're not based around the victims, they're based around the offenders. But it was sort of not either one, was it?
No, but he was a real distinct personality in himself, a real character. Yeah. So, I would just say that if you are wanting to watch the films and things, they do obviously reference the case, but they are centred around this whole book and the journalist rather than the family themselves.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Let's wrap it up. We've got a nice, decent length episode for you there. We hope you're still with us.
That'll be on the way to and on the way back from work.
Yeah.
Thanks ever so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye.
Take care.